There are tens of millions of people out there that are running some kind of side hustle from their basement, from their garage, from the spare bedroom, and they're earning extra money, a couple $1,000 a month up to, a substantial amount of money, a
In
couple
this
$100 a month.
economy,
Well, that's true. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people think in terms of financial independence by starting their own business. If I can start my own business, if I can build up my own business, I can be my own boss. I don't have to work for some jackass employer someplace anymore. And I don't have to punch a clock. I don't have to listen to somebody else's rules and adhere to their arbitrary rules and deadlines and so on. I can be my own boss. That's great.
until you
People are doing
realize that all those arbitrary rules and deadlines are then made up by the IRS that you got to follow.
Well, the IRS has got plenty of arbitrary rules and deadlines. In fact, I would argue to you that the entire Internal Revenue Code is just a barrage of arbitrary rules and deadlines. It really is, and that's one of the difficult things about studying the tax code and learning these various things is all of this stuff is so arbitrary. But back to the point that I'm making here is when you are self-employed, you've got a responsibility to report that income. However, not all the income is taxable, right? So you have the right to claim a deduction for any expense that's incurred for the purposes of earning income. And this is what self-employed people need to understand. You don't just get money showered on you. You have expenses that are incurred for the purposes of earning that income. And whatever those expenses are, you have the right to deduct those expenses on your tax return. So yeah, you report the gross income, then you report the expenses that you incurred to earn the income. The net income is what's taxable. And so, for example, when you get a 1099 from a company, that company is not going to take into consideration the expenses that you incurred to earn that money. It's your responsibility to keep the records of those expenses and to report those expenses on the tax.
It's a very, very complicated system, it sounds like. It also sounds like it makes compliance a lot more difficult. And we could definitely talk about, how much better a retail sales tax, because we do this. We go into that rabbit hole of how much better a retail sales tax would be compared to this system. What else do small business owners need to know when it comes to complying with the tax code? And I'm sure that's a pretty broad question.
Well, it is a broad question, but let me just say this. A lot of people, and small business owners in particular, the IRS will claim that most people are cheating on their tax returns by underreporting their income, right? But the fact of the matter is most people overpay their taxes. And I would argue to you that small businesses are in that group that generally overpays their taxes.